Sandy Bubble, owner of Jack Performance Parts.
Hi, Stuart.
G'day, how are you, Saj?
Very well. Welcome to the workshop. Today's session, we've got Stuart Furze joining us from Australia. So unusual time of the day for both of us to be doing this, morning for me and evening for you.
Yeah, that's what we're going to do to make it work, though.
Yeah. Thank you for coming along. We've had a chat before, the concept of what we're trying to do with the workshop. So really appreciate Xtreme taking part, a well-known brand of clutches. But before we talk about the products, let's have a bit about your history. Now, I was trying to find a profile picture, and all I could see was Ninja Warrior. What's that all about?
That's right. It's sort of a lot of people that are sort of been in the industry, around the world, probably caught wind of it. That I've done a couple of seasons of Australian Ninja Warrior and been part of this whole growth of the sport as well over the last sort of few years. And it's been pretty interesting. But a lot of people said all of a sudden start seeing me on TV in the UK as well when they play it over there or in New Zealand or wherever else.
Oh, that's really cool. I was quite surprised to see that. We meet up sort of fairly regularly. I think we do shows and we end up being normally at Autosport and so on. Tell us a bit about your background, because I know you're very technical and you're in engineering with Xtreme. So you're the man to come to when we've got sort of questions and issues or looking at unusual concepts and projects. So how did you get into this sort of field?
Well, I guess from a very young age, I was always fascinated with anything that had wheels, like mountain bikes and BMX bikes and skateboards and whatever else. And that's all I ever wanted to do was ride my bike when I was a kid. And it didn't matter, whether it was rain, hail, or shine. That's all I wanted to do. I got home from school, I would ride my bike until it was dark, and then same thing on the weekends. I never really wanted to play sports or anything like that when I was a kid. I didn't really like, Australian rules football or cricket or anything like that. So, I started, always working on my mountain bikes and push bikes, and my friends would, bring their bikes over so I could work on them. And then eventually I convinced my father to buy me a motorbike so I could ride that. And then that sort of started my passion for, I guess, motor engines, internal combustion engines. And, that carried out throughout school time, and I had several motorbikes. And then when I got to the age of, I think I was 14, I started to, gain a bit of interest into cars and reading about cars. And my family had a block of land at the time, and it was about 80 acres. And my father would buy cheap cars out of the newspaper. And at the age of 14, he would just let me drive these, $200 cars around the paddock, and I would just go hell for leather and nearly roll them on the roof. And I was, it's a wonder that I didn't injure myself. But the cars would break down, and I'd have to sort of work out how they worked a little bit. And my dad knew a bit about how cars work and things like that. He wasn't an engineer, or he wasn't a mechanic, but he knew a bit, and it was enough that he would, take some interest and try and help me through that. So eventually, we started to gain a bit of interest into motorsport. And in Australia, at the age of 14, you can get a Confederation of Australian Motorsport license. So at the age of 14, you're allowed to drive on a racing track.
Oh, wow.
And so that's what my father wanted to do, is, father-son activities on the weekend. And he was a very busy man during the week. So, on the weekends, we would go to our local track here, which was Mallala Motorsport Park. I remember the day that we went out there just to have a look, and the owner of the track, who would have been probably in his 80s at that time, he said, "No, you have to have a full driver's license to drive on my track." And my dad was like, "But, you can be 14 to get a Confederation of Australian Motorsport license. Why do you have to have a driver's license? Because in Australia, you have to be 16 years old to get a driver's license."
Mm-hmm.
So he read into the rules a fair bit, and this 80-year-old guy that owned the track appeared a bit grumpy. And anyway, we saw no reason that you couldn't turn up, and he didn't run the track on the days where the motorsport was on. So my father did the paperwork and got me a license to drive on the track, and he bought a car, an Alfa Romeo Alfetta, and at the age of 14, I was out on the track, doing these practice days, which back then there was 997 GT3s that were brand new going around, and I was 14. I didn't know what I was doing. I knew how to drive a car, I knew how to drive a manual, but I was, racing around, and Dad basically said, keep it on the black stuff, don't go into dirt, and just keep away from some of these other cars, because the last thing you wanted to do was
exactly. You don't want to hit any of those, yeah.
Yeah, you didn't want to end up in the door of a 997 GT3. So, I probably really didn't even understand, I guess, what I was doing at the time. But over the years, we sort of progressed through vehicles, and we went from Alphas, and then we ended up with my father bought a brand new 350Z back in 2003, and we went to a couple of tracks around Australia doing club sprints and things like that. And I was getting towards the end of, I guess, my schooling here, where you sort of get to the age of 17, 18, and I had to kind of make a decision on what I was going to do in tertiary education, because I always had a plan to do some tertiary education after school.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as I loved cars and things like that, I didn't really want to be a mechanic, and I always probably thought I was going to do something more. So I applied for engineering, mechanical engineering, and I was actually accepted. And then one day my mother saw an ad on TV about a motorsport school in Victoria, which is the next state over. And she said, I saw this thing, you should have a look. So I jumped on Google and I thought, what's this motorsport school? And started looking it up, and I'm like, wow, this is, amazing. A motorsport school, you can go and learn to be a motorsport engineer. And I'd never seen anything like it, and looked into the details, and I was only 18 years old, and my mum thought, there's no way Stuart's going to move into state to go and study motorsport. In Australia, our culture is very much that we sort of stay in the state that we're in. We don't tend to move states like they do to go to college in the US or something like that. So anyway, further along, you had to go over and you had to be interviewed to see if you could actually, you were suitable to go into this school. And I went over. It's about a 16-hour drive to get there. Had an interview. I got accepted, and I deferred my mechanical engineering at the University of South Australia here that I'd actually got into for 12 months so that I could go and study motorsport, basically. And the courses were very hands-on. It was probably 80% hands-on and 20% theory, and really it was accelerated. You'd cover off on most of the common I guess what would you call them, education points that you would do as an automotive mechanic. But you would specify in how they relate to motorsport. So things like you would talk about not just diffs, but you talk about diff ratios and how they would change. How you would calculate different diff ratios for different tracks. Same with gearboxes, clutches.
Cool. Yeah.
All of that was covered off. But then you would also go on the weekends. They had all these racing teams around the country, and you were kind of like an apprentice working for free. For
so you got really hands-on at the same time as learning.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was flat out for 12 months. There was almost no days off. You were doing something at a racetrack on the weekend, and then you were back at the the education centre during the week.
Well, that's almost the best way, that you're actually putting your theory into practice, aren't you, at the same time?
Yeah. And you met some really good people, not just the guys you're studying with, but also contacts within the industry. And some of them, I still maintain now that people in V8 supercar teams here in Australia, or even some of the guys that I studied with, we would go to the Formula One race here, and you would just make all these contacts, and just somehow they would ring you up and say, hey mate, can you come and help us out for a week or 2 weeks or something like that, after. And a lot of the guys really didn't even finish the first year of the course because they actually got employed just through their contacts.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really good.
That's really fortunate. And yeah, that's good. So
yeah,
that's
it
a good start
was
to the career.
amazing.
Yeah.
So anyway, I finished up there, and as much as I sort of it sounded like a really cool thing to be in a V8 supercar team here in Australia, or any other level of motorsport that was in its prime. This is back in 2006. It really, I probably looked at it and went, look, it's not a lifestyle that I want to live for the rest of my life. Working like crazy during the week and then having to go on the racetrack on the weekend, unless it's my own personal fun. So as much as I loved all the knowledge and I loved every single part of what I was doing there, I really at heart wanted to come back and study, the basics of engineering, so that I could, potentially go somewhere else.
Yeah.
So I came back and I ended up studying mechanical engineering at the University of South Australia. So in total, I studied for nearly 6 years. But all that time, I was involved in my own personal motorsport as well. I, for many years, competed in our local drifting competitions because that was when drifting was really starting to come up. And I actually competed in a national series and finished second outright in the series here in Australia before it all sort of started to die off.
That explains why last year when we were at Birmingham Wheels, you were so good compared to the rest of us.
That may have something to do with it. I didn't let that slip till the end though, did I?
I didn't know about all this. And I know you hold your Skyline, your 32 GTR.
Yeah, so and I've always had my hands on Jap cars, and they've always been a bit of a passion. I had quite a few Japanese cars myself, but not just Japanese cars. I've had European cars. I've had Australian domestic cars, Holdens, pretty much anything that's loud and fast and whatever. So but
it's great when you're working with people like yourself who've come through, got their hands dirty, understand the problems, they use the cars, that you can relate. When we come and discuss with you what we're doing, you can understand. So that's quite helpful to have people with that background in doing the job that you're doing.
Yeah, that's right. And basically once I finished studying my degree, I was looking for jobs, not necessarily local in South Australia and not necessarily in the automotive field. But, again, through my contacts of friends and through the automotive industry, because I'd worked at a few workshops, and had a lot of hands-on skills in machining, welding, and some real MacGyver type work that I had to do in these places. One of the contacts I had said, this company, Xtreme Clutch, Australian Clutch Services, is actually looking for an engineer, and I just graduated. And I sort of thought, I don't really want to work, with vehicles. I've done that, I don't really want to do that. I'm thinking about other things, but I thought I'll go and have a look and see what it's all about. And then, basically sort of fell into this position, and that was about 8.5 years ago now.
Okay.
And basically since then I've been helping grow, our product ranges, our products, the applications, all of the technical aspects and improving quality and things like that in every way possible that I can. And I guess it's like you would see with probably a lot of the guys that have come on and interviewed already, where we are enthusiasts, we have our own cars, we've worked in the automotive industry and we really have a passion for it. We aspire to know more and try and help our customers develop products in any way possible.
Yeah. And that really comes across when we meet up, we look at products and new development and ideas you're developing. So it's good to see that energy.
Yeah.
I've got a few people joining us here. Stuart, we've got Stuart saying hello. He's joining us in the UK, local rally driver. We've got, I think it sounds like one of your friends here with this. We've got Timothy from Dubai joining us, and Timothy's put up quite a few questions. We'll come to those, but before we come to the technical sort of clutches, tell us a little bit about Xtreme, the background. I know Brenton owns a company, how it's set up, and sort of the range of things that the company does.
So basically, Xtreme Clutch is a brand or division of Australian Clutch Services. Australian Clutch Services is a business that was developed nearly or just over 30 years ago. Our managing director, Brenton, had worked with brakes and clutches for many years for other companies. And he ended up acquiring some equipment and really started it from, in his shed at home, and then has sort of built it into what it is today. And Xtreme is the performance division of Australian Clutch Services, but Australian Clutch Services also has many other brands like Xtreme Outback, Agricultural Clutch, Classic Clutch, and X Clutch, which is more or less the US version of Xtreme.
Okay.
So through all of these brands, basically, we pull all of our knowledge, we pull all of our engineering, our marketing, everything together to really focus those brands on where they best suit around the world or what the vehicle applications are. So a lot of people might know Xtreme purely because of the motorsport aspect, and there's probably more marketing related to that brand, but really there's a lot more behind it in the parent company and the other brands associated with it.
Are you so involved in all the different markets, or you just specialize in the Xtreme range?
Yeah, so I get involved with all of the markets around the world, and I get to see a lot of the technical inquiries that come from everywhere, not just the UK or Europe. It comes from Asia, the US. Doesn't matter where it comes from, even local stuff. And it's really good to see that sort of feedback, because we get a lot of feedback on say one product that we might sell in the UK. You guys in the UK might say, hey, this is great, but can we change it in this way? And then guys in the US or even Hong Kong or something like that might say, hey, look, this is good, but our customers kind of want this. And we kind of bring that knowledge together and try and either make something that works for both, or even sometimes we'll find two different products for two different markets, because that's what the markets demand.
Yeah. What a question. We talk about sort of global presence, really. Regarding UAE, I know last time I think we met, you were traveling there. There are distributors there already in the UAE?
Yes, we do have a couple of very good distributors in the UAE. They specialize in a very specific set of vehicle applications, and we're trying to develop a little bit more of that for their market. And they're probably one of our most wild and exciting markets that we.
With those crazy Land Cruisers.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that when I met you last in Birmingham, and I was traveling there, I was only in the UAE for 2 days, and I think my jaw was on the ground for 2 days straight. It was just fascinating what they do over there.
Yeah. And those big power cars, you're supporting those as well, because I know there's some really crazy monster four-wheel drive machines out there.
Yeah. I mean, the Nissan Patrols and Land Cruisers, and I guess we've got all these guys in our workshop and guys building the product and all of this, and they see these products that we're building, and sometimes we're sitting there going, why are these guys asking for this product? And we really can't grasp what they're actually doing with them, and they try and explain it. And obviously there's some language barriers that we have to face as well, and you really can't get a grasp of it until you sort of turn up there and they show you the vehicles, and you're sort of thinking, wow, this is what you're doing with it. And we get this everywhere in the world, and all of a sudden you go, well, if that's what you're doing with it, we can offer you this product that's like going to help do what you were trying to achieve. But because sometimes that language barrier, even photos and all this, it's just not enough to actually really hammer home, hey, this is how we can improve it, or this is what you should do to just make this slight change and we can help.
It's amazing how conversation helps. We've had these conversations before, but trying to sort of sit down with customers, and until you physically sit down, talk it through, explain it, you can't do that on a leaflet or a brochure or a website. It's very difficult. And part of the reason why we've invited you to come on here is really, let's discuss the products, the different materials, different applications. We'll look at drivability over sort of performance and practicality and so on. So lots of things you've got to factor into. A clutch, I think we were speaking to Maz yesterday about the fine line between road and race, and a clutch is one of those critical components that can either make the car great or ruin it for a driver.
That's right. And and like any business, there's a lot of information on the internet. There's a lot of I guess, misinformed information.
Mhm.
And, we're always sort of, battling that, trying to educate our resellers and our customers and, even through social media, everything,
Mhm.
to try and give them, the information that we know so that we can help them make the best informed decision for whatever
Yeah.
they're doing, whether it's just a road car or, even sometimes whether it's 4x4 related.
Yeah.
If the last thing we want people to do, particularly nowadays with e-commerce is so strong, the last thing we want is for people to be ordering something thinking that, oh, this is going to be great because I'm spending the most amount of money. It's going to be the best product. And then really they didn't need to spend the most amount of money. That's not the goal here.
Yeah.
They really just needed a basic product which would have done the job.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of myths around sort of race clutches for road, and some of the products you've got, even your stage 1 organics are so strong now they can cope with most sort of decent power road cars anyway. You don't need to go for race clutches. But look, I think maybe let's move on to a little bit about clutches now. Our audience here is going to be mixed, sort of resellers, private users, race road customers. But I think let's cover maybe some of the materials. We talk about organics, ceramics, paddles, twins, carbons. Give us sort of an overview of the different materials that you would normally supply.
So our philosophy in our product offerings is to try and keep it a reasonably simple offering. We see a lot of our competitors, mixing materials and doing various different things, which can work, but we try to keep it, a relatively simple spread and tailor that to what that vehicle is. So generally, you've always got your work from the bottom up, and you have a organic friction material, and that organic friction material is always going to provide you some level of drivability, depending on what stage of kit it's in. If it's just a stage 1 kit, what we call a 1A, that's generally should drive almost like a standard clutch, maybe a little bit heavier pedal, but you don't normally have any chatter or shudder or anything like that. And then from there on up, we move into a sintered facing on a sprung disc, which we call a cushion ceramic. That again provides a small amount of drivability with a fairly significant increase in torque. And the ceramic friction material, what that does is the coefficient of friction is a lot higher than what an organic is. So it has the capabilities to hold more torque and absorb a little bit more heat. Organic friction material, when you start using that on, a racing car on, or even, something like an Evo, and you got a guy that wants to, I use the analogy, be Ken Block. All of a sudden you start to get build up a lot of heat in that material, and it can break down almost like a brake pad, or very similar. And once it starts to break down, you can start to do some serious damage to that friction material. They can break apart. They can start to slip if they get too hot. You can even get to the point where you've got smoke coming out of your bell housing, and you're in some serious trouble. So that's generally the reason that we try and step guys into a ceramic friction material.
So not normally with the organics, we would normally class them as the OEM clutch, stage 1, and covering sort of light modified road cars. That's how we would normally use them, and they fit perfectly there because we find them really drivable, really comfortable, and like you say, they feel like OEM. The pedal's not so heavy, and most of we work with sort of Subarus, Evos, Skylines, and they feel very comfortable with those.
Yeah, and that's always our target in our stage 1 heavy duty clutch kits, is to almost retain factory drivability. We don't want to ruin the vehicle. If you've got a guy that's got a really late model WRX STI, and he might be putting an exhaust on it, and he might put some coilovers in it, and a little bit of boost and things like that, and a tune. But you don't want him chattering around in car parks and then not enjoying driving the car anymore, particularly if it's still his daily driver.
Well, this is the important thing. I think when you're sort of speccing clutches, or we spec with customers, it's so important to explain how each clutch will feel. And I'm sure when you talk about twins, you'll explain the different type of driving and the noises and the comfort. But carry on.
So after our stage 1, we go into a stage 2, and there's really 2 options there. We have a cushion ceramic, and that cushion ceramic provides a bit of drivability as well, can have a little bit of chatter, but does sort of provide a reasonable step up from the stage 1. We also have the option there in that stage 2 to go to a paddle type friction material. It will have a little bit more chatter than the organic, and generally that's the type of thing you give to an entry level drift guy, something like that. Sometimes the rally guys are okay with using them, but generally it's not a daily driver type clutch. You'll have a bit of chatter. You might get a little bit of extra noise. Occasionally you get some squeals out of them. But in general, they'll take a good amount of heat. And if you've got a guy that can be really rough on the road, sometimes they will select that and they'll be happy with it.
Yeah.
And
we find that clutch, the 1B ceramic clutch, is the sort of perfect clutch for our track day customers. People who've got something with sort of 450 horsepower, and it's a road car, but it's used fairly regularly on track. But also we find that's a really good clutch for rally cars. So a lot of Group N stuff we're doing, we've gone for this clutch, and people are really, really getting on well with it. The sprung ceramic. Yeah.
And from there we step into what we call stage 3. So we call that a 1R, and that is basically the highest level that we can do in a single disc or a single plate clutch that fits onto the OEM flywheel. So without changing flywheels, without going to a twin plate, that's really what we call our dedicated motorsport clutch. It can have a lot heavier pedal. It runs more or less the same friction material and the same friction disc that's in the 1B, but the clamping force is increased quite significantly, anywhere between sort of 40 to 50% over what the original factory clutch was. And generally, that range is kind of limited in its application, because nowadays with all of the technology and the development that we can do, we tend to push a lot of customers towards a twin plate before the 1R, mainly because back in the early 2000s, we didn't have the technology and the manufacturing skills and the engineering and all of that to develop twins for so many applications so quickly. So doing a motorsport clutch in a single disc was what everybody did back then. And now that we've got all this knowledge, we can build a better clutch in a twin than that motorsport clutch, but it still has its applications. Again, you've got some of these rally guys, even like you said, Group N, they want to stick to a specific inertia or a specific flywheel. They have to run that flywheel. They're not allowed to put a twin in it. So that's really where that application sits.
We've got a question here. Timothy's asking on the subject twin plates. Now we've come to that. So some are sprung, some are unsprung. If you maybe mention how the application of sort of sprung twins and where you normally use a rigid twin.
So really what we've released and we've been working on for probably about 2 years now is our range of sprung twins. And traditionally, all of our 230mm twin plates were all rigid. We never had a sprung center for them. We had a sprung center for our 200mm twins, but also offered a rigid center next to that. But now for 2020, we've basically opened up all of our 230mm range to be able to offer that sprung hub, and we've been testing it in quite a few different vehicles, including our own. We've got a 2018 Mustang 5-litre with a supercharger on it that's 900 horsepower at the crank, and we've been testing that like rigorously for the last 12 months. Before
you're enjoying yourself in that car.
Not the back tires though. So we do offer the rigid, and we're offering sprung in some applications, and even down to our 184mm motorsport clutches, we do have some applications where we'll offer a sprung center in that. But really, to answer the question, where do you apply each? It does depend on, first of all, the horsepower, second of all, the type of vehicle that it's going into. And I can give a couple of good examples for that. Generally, if you're running a sequential gearbox, we don't tend to offer a sprung hub for that. And the reason, for dedicated motorsport use, obviously, the reason for that is because the way that the shifts work and the amount of inertia that you've got running through your pistons, your rods, your crank, flywheel, all of that, and then you are slowing the engine speed from, let's say, 8,000 RPM in an STI to, let's say, 6 in a nanosecond through a dog gear, all of that inertia has to stop on one component, and that one component is the sprung hub that's in there. So the sprung hubs tend to suffer quite heavily when you put them with a sequential gearbox.
Yeah.
When you're running a traditional H-pattern gearbox, or synchro mesh gearbox, something like a 5-speed WRX gearbox, that gearbox is the perfect example of where you want to put a sprung hub. Or really any standard STI gearbox even. We all know that Subaru gearboxes, are not made of, really strong materials. Some of them could be classed as made of glass. So that sprung hub is really a saving grace for those types of transmissions. It provides a dampener to take that peak shock loading off of the gears when you're either launching it or really doing hard shifts. And it really just puts a little dampener in there. So you can see where with the same clutch, but really just sprung versus not sprung, you can apply them in two different applications. And that goes for all of our range of clutches from 184mm, 200mm, 230mm, and then some of the ones that is not really UK specific, but we do one that's 264mm as well, which is even larger again. But that's really for V8 stuff only.
In terms of what we see through our shop is mainly the common Japanese cars, and they all tend to be pull clutches. Now, there's a question regarding push. Now, I know you supply some 200s with a conversion kit. What's the benefit of having a conversion to a push bearing instead of a pull bearing?
I guess there's a few reasons why you would do that. Traditionally, for really the two applications we're talking about, which is STI or WRX and Evo, those two run that pull clutch, and we offer the 230mm clutch in that with the pull style. It keeps everything inside, completely factory. You don't have to switch a fork around, but it is a larger clutch because we are using the OEM diaphragm, the OEM type bearing to achieve all of that. And they're really capable, they'll hold 1,000 horsepower, but sometimes for some guys, that inertia on that large clutch is a little bit too much. So to go down to the more racing style clutches that some of the guys want, the 200mm, 185mm, those clutches, we have to basically go to a push type diaphragm in order to get the clamping force that we need and actually fit everything in without obviously going crazy and engineering completely application specific parts. The simplest thing is to come up with these conversions like many other clutch manufacturers have done in the past. But they're also depends on, we see the markets in different places in the world. You might get, say, the UK loves the push conversions, they're happy to put them in, and then you might go to somewhere like the US or Hong Kong or something, and they say, oh no, we don't want the push ones, we only want to use pull ones. And you sort of think, okay, why is that? And it's kind of just like, oh, the guys on forums there say that you have to use a pull or whatever. So we tailor to those markets, and at the end of the day, we're happy to. But it really just comes down to what are you doing with the car? What are your intentions, and what are your goals in the future? And the question I always ask as well is, when I'm dealing with a customer, is what have you run in the past? Has it worked? Has it not worked? Because let's analyze that and make sure that we're applying the right product here.
Yeah. Your parts list must be huge, Stuart, with the range of vehicles, the range of clutches, all the components and the conversion kits. It must be a massive parts bin.
It is. It is. And, we do an extremely good job of, optimizing all of those components and ensuring that we can manage them in the most efficient way. And, even our sales guys, it's really quite a task for them to have, they've got all these electronic systems and everything, so they can look through catalogs to find vehicles. But, to have a mental catalog, something like kind of what I do for such a huge range of vehicles it's pretty difficult for someone starting out. And even, for us to try and train our resellers on that, like our STI and Evo part numbers and all of that, and you know very fluid with them, and you know what all the suffixes mean, and you can kind of work out part numbers very easily, and you know what the parts look like, and you can sort of tell the difference. So you know that's really good. But then to try and train somebody in that, it takes a lot of time.
It is a minefield.
And I remember even speaking to you at Birmingham once, and you sort of said, like, you know, I'm really comfortable with selling Mitsubishi and Subaru stuff, but you know, you're talking to this guy about a Nissan S14 before, and he's like, you're sort of like, oh, you know, I don't really know enough about them.
I know when we normally Autosport, you get people with MGs and
a
whole range of cars that, you know, the coverage is massive. Regarding parts, Sabrina's asking, what are the flywheels made of?
So our Xtreme performance flywheels are made from a 4140 chromoly. They are all heat-treated ring gears. They're single piece. And generally we have a range of static weights that we work off of. So if it's a C suffix on the end of the part number, that generally means it can be about 5 to 10% lower weight than what a factory one is. And then we have CL, which is, you know, up to 20%, and then sometimes we will do like a ultra light as well. But all of those flywheels and all of our motorsport flywheels in our twin plates and triple plates, they're all made from 4140 and heat treated.
Well, one thing I like about the clutch kits is when you buy a clutch kit, it comes obviously with all the bits, but it comes with a lining tool, you get a spigot bush, you get the grease. It comes with everything you need, so it's good as a workshop. You don't have to look for any bits or order anything else in. So that's one real benefit.
And that's one of the key things that probably differentiates us from some of our competitors. That we're trying to offer a complete package to ensure that the guy that's got it on his ramp, he's not sitting there going, "Oh, great, I've got this new clutch, but really we should have ordered flywheel bolts yesterday, but we don't have any," or we should have ordered a spigot bearing yesterday, but we don't. Or how are we going to align this clutch because we don't have an alignment tool in the shop that's like that. So, you know, we really want to make sure that we can help the guys not only fit it correctly, but fit it efficiently the first time around. Because the last thing you want to do is, and everybody's done it, doesn't matter what component it is, whether it's brakes, whether it's whatever, suspension, you go to put everything together, it's the weekend, the week leading up to a track day, and all of a sudden you get there, you're like, oh no, I don't have this bolt, or I don't have, this. So, we try and put, technical documents in there to try and help these guys as well that are fitting them. Because, it might be the first time they've ever worked on a WRX and they don't understand how a pull type bearing comes out of the diaphragm. So, if we can help them, it might save them making a phone call, or it might save them, with an issue later on.
Yeah, the technical bulletins are great when you go on the website and you look at the common question, torque setting on the bolts. And I know now with the twins, you actually write the torque setting on the plates themselves. So, it's lots of little changes you make our lives and the customers' lives easier. So that's all good. The other thing I want to mention, which is quite important, is the twins are the rebuild, the service kits. So conventionally, we would have had twins, and if they've worn out, you're going to scrap the whole lot. You've lost 2,000 pounds of clutch. Whereas now with the rebuild kits, you can offer plates, dividers, bearings, whatever you need. So that's really handy to increase the lifespan of a clutch.
Well, that's right. And at the end of the day, it's not just necessarily that you might wear out a clutch. If you have a gearbox failure or something like that, and somehow your clutch gets contaminated, you don't want to have to replace the clutch if your rear main seal blew out and destroyed all of your organic friction material. So, to be able to offer a service kit is going to help guys in that way as well. And, that's, again, it's a huge task for us to have all those part numbers and applications set up and stocked to try and to cover off on such the large range of products that we offer. But it's just that extra step that we go to try and help our resellers and offer the after sales support that is also very important. Yeah.
In terms of stock, I think, with people hopefully watching us from Europe as well, explain the network. You've got the main hub in Poland. You've got a hub in the UK as well. And you've got people like us who are holding stock. So there's a real good network of getting parts next day within Europe with what you've set up.
Yeah, so we use a company, Ozparts, in Europe. They manage all of the inquiries and all of that for the entire Europe for us. And the reason for that is because basically they have the stock holding, they know what they've got in stock, and they can work within those time zones throughout Europe and organize all that dispatch and everything, which makes it a lot more simple for us. And we're obviously always there backing them up for any support that they need for technical inquiries or anything like that. But for them to sort of hold stock, it means that the customers aren't necessarily having to hold stock, or they can get a much faster service time than having to deal direct with Australia. And the same goes for the UK. We have the warehouse in Birmingham, which services all of the UK and Ireland. And basically then we have our fantastic customers like USAG, who hold stock of all of the common kits so that you can service your customers even quicker rather than waiting for day freight or freight from Australia weekly, whatever it is.
So it's a good all-round package. You've got the massive range, you've got the massive stock, so it sort of ticks all the boxes, and the prices are very competitive. Stuart, I've got a really good question here. Sabrina's asking a question now. I can probably answer part of this. Now, what should you upgrade first? The clutch. Now, normally we have this discussion with customers coming in. We sit down and plan builds, and this is sort of time of year when people generally want before the season to plan their cars. And often people say, I want a 500 horsepower engine. That's all well and good. That's part of the whole project. You got to look at fueling. You got to look at ECUs, cooling, and clutch is another key component. The engine is only part of the project. So often we'll discuss ideas, and sometimes they want to do it in stages where they'll do an engine, then they'll do the fueling, and then they'll do the cooling, and then they'll put a bigger turbo. So do it in stages. But the clutch is one of those things. It's a bit of an investment as well if you're going to go for a race clutch. So it's a discussion whether you do that first and put the money in so it's there for later, or whether you just run with the stock and then do it at the end. What do you normally advise people when you're looking at like a race clutch in an incremental build?
I think it's very important to, I guess, assess what your goals are with a vehicle, whether it is just a fast road car or whether you really are looking at turning it into a dedicated race car. Because I guess in my experience with toying with cars, and I see all of my companions around social media as well, that get a car and at 1 minute it's a daily driver and you're driving it to work, and then before you know it, it's got no back seats and it has a roll cage in it. And so you really need to probably have a good grasp on what you're doing, because it is a significant investment for most people building a car or modifying a car. The clutch is one of the significant investments. You have a reasonable portion of labor and time that has to go into fitting it, and then obviously the componentry cost is quite high as well compared to, say, maybe a blow-off valve or whatever else that you might be able to put on. So it's not a component that you're going to put in and then just switch out. So you really need to probably have that goal set and go, okay, look, this is what I really plan to do. It probably will be a track car maybe one day. So I'm going to go for a 1B. I'm happy to put up with a bit of chatter because I know that I'm going to end up driving it on the track. And I know that I'm going to buy that bigger turbo, because I don't have that self-control. So, I think it's important to be realistic about those goals. And then the other side of it as well is you don't want to overcapitalize, because we do see that occasionally too, where a guy might go into a shop and say, I need a 500 horsepower clutch. And then somehow the reseller gets this information. Oh, the guy's got 650 horsepower about that. We need a clutch for 650 horsepower. Yeah. And then before you know it, the guy's ended up with a full-blown racing twin where really he said he had 500 horsepower. That might have been his goal in the future, but he's still only got,
This is a really important point. So it came up yesterday in conversation as well. There's that line between sort of race and road, and in terms of clutches, it's that comfort thing is critical, because you mentioned having a big power clutch or a cable clutch, twin plate ceramic for a guy who's going to be running around the street in traffic. It's going to be horrible to drive. But there's a lot of, I think you mentioned as well about misinformation or people not enjoying their clutches because they picked the wrong ones or been recommended the wrong type of clutch. So it's very important to do the research as what type of clutch suits your driving style or your plans for your car, because the wrong clutch can actually ruin the driving experience.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, at the end of the day, we build all of our products to be as drivable as possible, but still, we do occasionally, probably like most brands, you get a guy that's buying coilovers or something like that and thinking, oh, this is going to be great. And then he puts them in and goes, oh, wow, these are really stiff. I've potentially made the wrong decision. Same with tires, brakes, whatever it is. It is the same with clutches. You go and put a full-blown race clutch in a car and you do drive it on the street. You won't get the same mileage that you're going to get with a stage 1 clutch installing that. And it's important to sort of to weigh up all those options and make the right decision.
Good. I've got another question here. Timothy's asking, this is a theme, obviously, with the sign of times at the moment, and it's coming up with everyone's business, how things are affecting in Australia, your logistics, your factory. How have things been there?
Definitely within Australia, we've felt the effects. I wouldn't say probably like with a lot of these global issues, even GFC in 2008, Australia is a very large landmass, but it's not very densely populated. So we tend to sort of have a bit of a shield, I would say, from the hardcore effects of these types of things. But having said that, in the state of South Australia where we are located, and this is where our 2 facilities are, we definitely have felt the effect because all of our suppliers, all of our freight companies that we use, all of our customers, the whole chain, everybody's sort of been hurt in a manner. But we've definitely put some very good measures in place, and we were very proactive in seeing that coming, so we could actually, help our customers, help ourselves, manage all of that. But definitely, we've had probably the same type of issues that everybody has, and there's not many companies in the world that'd be saying that their business is up.
Exactly.
All of this stuff.
For sure. We've all been suffering the same sort of issues. Just got a break there, but I think with the COVID-19 affecting all businesses over these last 2 months, we've found a lot of people are doing a lot of DIY work. So a lot of small bits going out. But now in the UK, sort of from June, I think businesses are opening up again. So hopefully that backlog will springboard us to sort of bigger business in the future. But that's why we're taking an opportunity on this group just to discuss ideas and bring experts like yourself to share your experiences and what you're doing. Hopefully, everyone in the group's found that helpful today. And I really appreciate you joining us today, Stuart. It's been a really good session.
Thanks a lot.
We'd love to have you back maybe another day. If people want, we could do a technical session. You could show us some products and go into a bit more detail.
Yeah, sure.
But lovely to see you. You take care.
Thanks a lot, Saj. I really appreciate the opportunity.
That's okay. You take care.
Thanks. See ya.
Bye-bye.
I am Sandy Noble, owner of Jack Performance Parts.